So I understand that everyone was upset about the death of Jazz, him being just overpowered and then ripped apart by Megatron in the first Transformers movie, left a bad taste in everyone's mouth here. And in all honesty, it did give the Bayverse some hate because, in all honesty, let's be real here, Michael Bay really didn't care about the Transformers at all. Or more often than not, it was catering towards the military than the actual Autobots. But what if I told you Jazz's death at the hands of Megatron was actually the proper way for him to go out here? And believe it or not, he's a lot stronger than people give him credit for. Let's talk about it. So, I hope you guys enjoyed the gameplay. It's Elder Kraken today from Evolve, and well, let's get on to with the video. So we're going to be using every form of Bayverse media, canon, and even some of the non-canon material to kind of show how powerful Jazz is. We'll basically be using media interpretation, basically how he was promoted and how he was advertised, how he was handled in the novelizations, and then how he was handled in the comics as well as having some cross-scaling with the other Autobots. So without further ado, let's talk about it. So in the guidebooks or the promotional material for the movie here, we actually have Jazz versus Blackout. Now, believe it or not, this is actually a consistent thing throughout the entire Bayverse. Jazz is always fighting against Blackout and actually wins more consistently here. You see, Jazz and Blackout rarely interact with each other, even in the novels here. The only time Jazz actually interacts with Blackout in the novelization is when he's toying with him and Bone Crusher and Frenzy at the same time. Now, see, Jazz versus Blackout being portrayed in Transformers the game, Transformers the Nintendo DS game, and then obviously in the promotional material and the novelization. Jazz is consistently portrayed to be above Blackout. And even again, in Transformers the game, he's even above Blackout with the aid of Starscream. So again, this is a consistent form in the Bayverse, okay? Or a consistent fight and a consistent portrayal within the Bayverse media and even in the main continuity. So this means that Jazz would actually be able to beat Blackout. Now, how powerful is Blackout? Well, it's actually confirmed that Blackout is capable of fighting against Ironhide. And then we have the sheer fact that if he's above Blackout with help, even with the aid of Starscream, then we also have to compare, is Jazz greater than Starscream as well here? Now, we will talk about how powerful Ironhide is when he's not holding back, because again, this is when the Autobots can actually use their full strength. But first things first, we're going to have to talk about Starscream. Now, do I think Jazz can beat Starscream in a one-on-one? Yes, I do. Because again, Blackout should be around the same levels as Starscream, as is consistently portrayed here. And again, even if you wanted to use Transformers the game, it's actually confirmed to be a high difficulty battle between Ironhide and Blackout, excuse me. But then if you use Transformers, the movie where Starscream ambushes a holding back Ironhide and Ratchet, then you could say Starscream's above them, or should at least be comparable to them at their full strength. Keep in mind the Autobots are holding back in Mission City, and we will get into that later. But again, if we go by the novelizations as well, where it's portrayed that Jazz not only toyed with characters like Blackout and Bone Crusher, but he didn't think anything of them. You see, the entire plan was for Jazz to distract the Decepticons while Ironhide sneaks around and makes his way to their ship's reactor and then blows it up. So Jazz is consistently spinning around, toying, and even palming the head of Bone Crusher while dancing around Blackout shots. However, one of the moments here where Jazz pretty much gets overconfident and simply spins out of Bone Crusher's orbit, Blackout does manage to hit him with his cannon. And again, this is the cannon that we saw in the beginning of the movie, where he was straight up annihilating an entire military base. So, Jazz actually gets hit by this cannon. Jazz actually gets hit by the cannon, and pretty much he has to just, well, go with the flow. He's not knocked out, but he is somewhat damaged from it here. However, Jazz then pulls out his own crescent cannon and actually uses the rapid fire function to actually push back both Bone Crusher and Blackout at the same time. now taking the fight seriously. However, before Jazz can likely capitalize and use its stronger settings here, Starscream comes in and ambushes Jazz further, and believe it or not, this leaves Jazz in a critically damaged state. But again, he is still conscious, and Ironhide does manage to catch him in time, but he doesn't get to blow up the reactor. However, Jazz goes on to not only defeat Frenzy, but he also goes on to help get Bone Crusher off of Ironhide, and together they both force him out of their ship. So, that's to go back to Jazz versus Starscream. How is that going to handle out, right? So, if Jazz is able to toy around with Blackout and Bone Crusher before getting hit, and Starscream is the one who needed to ambush him in order to, well, help his own troops out, then I think it's pretty self-explanatory that if Jazz and Starscream actually had a one-on-one, that fight could go either way. And again, I am leaning towards Jazz, high difficulty. You see, when Jazz takes something seriously, he can push back even the biggest of Decepticons and get the upper hand on them immediately. Again, Starscream is one of those Decepticons that he would take seriously, but if he's not taking, characters that can fight against Ironhide seriously, then that says a lot now, doesn't it? Now, when it comes down to Starscream versus Jazz here, there are some things we do have to look at. Starscream's mindset versus Jazz's mindset. Starscream's tactics versus Jazz's tactics. Jazz is going to be there direct, straightforward, and, well, pretty much just in the fight 24/7, while Starscream will take advantage of his jet form and even ambush his opponents. This is something consistently portrayed even with characters like Ironhide. Now, if you guys want a good scale for that, Ironhide was able to match Shockwave blow for blow and blast for blast until, again, Starscream came in and ambushed him. This seems to be a very consistent thing with Starscream, where if his own allies can't get it done, he'll then swoop around and ambush the opponent that took him. It's a consistent thing here. Meanwhile, Jazz is directly in the fight and actually beating down characters that would possibly be physically stronger than Starscream and possibly more powerful. So this means that Jazz in a one-on-one situation not only would be more careful with Starscream, but would likely get to him before he, well, tries any ambush tactics. But then again, Jazz has been shown to be able to react to ambush tactics as well here. And, well, it doesn't really bode too well for those who actually try that. As in one of the comics here, if I actually do manage to find it, he was actually chilling with an Autobot Clocker when Bone Crusher ambushed him and Jazz had his spark out. Bone Crusher almost ripped his spark out, but Jazz was able to actually counter him and push him back, but Clocker needed to step in and hold off Bone Crusher while Jazz actually, well, fixed himself up a bit. But unfortunately, this did result in Clocker's death, and, well, Bone Crusher did get away. So, with that being said here, yeah, I do think Jazz could handle an ambush from Starscream, and believe it or not, definitely beat him. Now, you might say, well, why do you think that? And then, my reason is pretty simple. He outranks and definitely outclasses characters like Mirage and the aerial bots and feats. Now, again, Starscream is pretty powerful. No one's saying about that. As you guys saw earlier, he was able to one-shot RC and Cliffjumper, who were able to beat Thundercracker, who was basically handling, Camshaft and Cliffjumper at the same time, with both of those guys being slightly better than Bumblebee. Cliffjumper is slightly stronger, and then Camshaft is more durable than Bumblebee. However, they are seemingly relative to each other in some way. And then you have the sheer fact that Mirage was able to go toe-to-toe with Starscream in a one-on-one until Sideswipe and Bumblebee came in and proceeded to press that advantage. Meaning, again, Mirage should be greater than RC's team, and Bumblebee in Dark and Moon is upgraded because, again, Stealth Force as well as Sideswipe as well. So, if we put that together, and again, Jazz is able to handle Starscream and Blackout at the same time, then what we have here is Jazz being, again, one of the strongest Autobots out there. Or, again, comparable to Optimus Prime and Megatron, or at least close to their levels. Now, if we actually go into the movie adaptation of the comic, which, believe it or not, actually utilizes the deleted scenes from the movie, from the original writing of the movie. You see, this script had many things happening where Optimus was supposed to fight Barricade and kill him, which is the reason why, Optimus wasn't able to make it to Mission City on time. And we have Jazz one-shotting Brawl. Again, this is something that has this is, again, one of the few things that have been portrayed within the other forms of Bayverse media. You see, Jazz and Ratchet both having experience with Brawl, while Ironhide's kind of the newbie when it comes to basically fighting him, right? So their tactic was to rush Brawl before he can cause too much damage. And the reason why is because Brawl actually was able to, nuke an entire Autobot team with Optimus and Jazz there. Jazz and Optimus, along with Prowl, got hit at ground zero of Brawl's blast, combined with an Energon pocket explosion. This then wound up mauling Prowl, but Optimus and Jazz were just fine. So you have the sheer fact that Jazz is able to take a blast from one of the most heavy-hitting Decepticons in the Bayverse franchise. Again, when it comes to weaponry, and I guess you could say movies 1 through 3 in a way here, yes, Brawl was definitely one of the heaviest hitters before we had Devastator and obviously other characters, right? So with that being said here, yeah, Jazz is definitely close to the levels of Megatron. Now you might say, could he beat Megatron? And my answer is simply no. No, he couldn't. I mean, this is still Megatron we're talking about here. First movie Megatron, the absolute menace. But here's the thing. If they fought in a physical, hand-to-hand fight, right? Jazz's speed, agility, his combat reflexes, and believe it or not, if he was allowed to go all out, he could actually hold Megatron off until Optimus Prime arrived, at the very least here. Possibly using things like hit and run tactics, using his vehicle form, maybe even luring Megatron away from more, I guess you could say, heavily populated areas, and, I guess you could say, kind of delaying him until Optimus arrives here. But if we actually put him against other versions of Megatron, like TF2, and, obviously Dark of the Moon, I think everybody should be able to beat Dark in the Moon here. I mean, I think Ironhide could definitely beat him, and Jazz should be able to as well. It's one of the weaker versions of Megatron. But against something like TF2, Jazz would take advantage of Megatron's disability with mass shifting and then be able to capitalize on that. But again, let's go also with the more holding back argument in Mission City. We know that Ironhide is one of the biggest examples when it comes to his firepower, right? So he actually has to hold back. And as you guys saw earlier, when he's actually about to land, he's actually going to possibly land on those two humans. So what he does is he boosts himself with his cannons using a lower level shot to actually pass over and then to just get out of the range of him landing on those humans. And again, this is important here. If the Autobots cannot utilize their firepower effectively, especially someone like Ironhide, who's known to one-shot Decepticons repeatedly with his firepower, unless they're like Shockwave, Starscream, Blackout, and obviously, relative Decepticons, obviously. But if he's known to one-shot Decepticons with his firepower, then this actually makes it worse for him in the Mission City fight. And this is important here because Ironhide's firepower could have been vital in handling characters like Starscream. We actually see that he has to take more precautions when he has to aim because, again, his firepower is more destructive than the rest of the Autobots that are there. And again, we see this within the comics, again, the tie-in comics, where he's basically clearing Mission City of the Decepticons. He's one-shotting them repeatedly. In Transformers Revenge of the Fallen, one-shotting them. And again, in Dark of the Moon, he's one-shotting Decepticons. Okay? So again, none of the Autobots can utilize their firepower to their fullest capability because they cannot risk human casualties on their end. So, with that being said here, how powerful is Jazz? Well, if we recap here real quick here, He's above Megatron's elites. This includes Bone Crusher, who should be equal to Ironhide, Blackout, who should be slightly greater than Ironhide, but it's an extreme difficulty battle. Jazz would also be greater than characters that can fight Starscream one-on-one, such as Mirage, and should also be greater than Sideswipe, Mirage, and Bumblebee, considering, again, if we use Transformers the game, where he's basically beating Blackout with help, he would also be greater than that entire team. This will also include RC's team as well of Air Raid, Camshaft, Cliff Jumper, Smokescreen, and Air Raid, Camshaft, and herself, obviously. Sorry, my bad. So, yes, he would actually be greater than them as well, who all lost to Thundercracker, except for Cliff Jumper and RC, who were able to take him down. And then Starscream being able to one-shot them, meaning that he's 10 times stronger than, well, obviously his own second in command, which actually is pretty legit. You know, it's Starscream. He's second to Megatron. And again, Jazz is second to Optimus. So, with that being said here, Jazz, believe it or not, dying by Megatron was not a bad thing. However, if you guys want to like an official tiering, then he would scale above Camshaft, who, as I showed earlier, is powered by the Allspark, but again, that not a significant amount here. Now, you can use this for multiple ways. You can either pull him at solar system level, because again, the Allspark is able to absorb and eat stars, with some of them being bigger than the last. So it's very possible you could say solar system or galaxy level for the average Cybertronian or for relevant Cybertronians. Or again, we could actually use the lower ends for that and use star. I'm more comfortable with the star end for that one because again, I'm not saying Jazz is a lesser Autobot, but he doesn't really get that full Allspark scaling like Megatron, Optimus, Grimlock, and Sentinel Prime, the Fallen, and etc. So, with that being said here, that's going to just wrap it up for Jazz here. He's definitely one of the more powerful members of the Bayverse. Please comment down below, like and subscribe and share with your friends. This is Legendary Grimlock, and I hope you guys have a blessed day.